Welcome to Volume 11 of RC Video Magazine. Our first stop will be the Lake Havasu Fun Float Fly. We then go to Reston, Virginia to test fly Bob Underwood's Thingamabob. Then hold on for the RC Crash Course. Ed Nakasone is back with his Break a Blade series. We then go to Texas for a visit to quarter-scale car manufacturer WCM. And finally, we bring you a review of two Hobby Shack EZ kits. Lake Havasu, Arizona is an oasis in the desert and a great place to enjoy the water. If you enjoy flying radio-control airplanes on floats, then there can be no better place in the middle of January than Lake Havasu's second annual Fun Float Fly, sponsored by the Desert Hawks. This year, a whole raft of floating aircraft gathered on the banks of Lake Havasu. Beachfront property was supplied by the Nautical Inn, and this is truly a perfect location for a weekend of splash and go. Here's the ET, Bob Martin's new trainer. In this form, he calls it ETOF. That's Easy Trainer on Floats. Thomas Hart brought this scratch-built Terrier powered with an OS-28. This could be a little aerial combat with Das Wet Stick. This unusual-looking Goldberg Jr. Tiger belongs to Mark Young. Power supplied by a Bluebird 25 engine. This small sport plane looks right at home on floats. Here's Joe Bridie starting a Super Tiger 3000 on the front of his Big B. Joe is the manufacturer of the Bridie line of fine kits. Before Joe takes the Big B off, let's watch the rescue boat in action retrieving this 1936 Quaker Flash. When it's your plane being rescued, you have to appreciate the careful handling these volunteers use to retrieve the plane. Okay, Joe, let's see what the Big B can do. Joe tells us the Big B is a quarter-scale trainer aircraft with a 96-inch wing. It has 1,630 inches of wing area. The Big Bee will fly with a 90 to a 120 or larger two-stroke, a twin-cylinder or small gas engine. Takeoff weight approximately 15 pounds. This aircraft was listed on the entry form as a homebrew. It was built by Jim Lime of Cottonwood, Arizona. Jim tells us that it's made from an ugly stick wing expanded to 69 inches, and the fuselage is a foam float left square on top. Power is supplied by an old OS-61 FSR. This Flybaby Bipe was also built by Jim Lime. This will be its maiden voyage on floats. Jim says it's only 5 years old and was recently retrofitted with a Sato 270 two-cylinder four-stroke engine. Built from a house of balsa kit, it was once crashed and he scratch-built a new fuselage. Looks to us like it was born to be on floats. This Sig Morrissey Bravo is Carl Abjohn's entry. He has powered it with a Quadra 35cc engine. This plane looks well suited for floats. Let's see how it handles the small waves on Lake Havasu. No problem. Now let's see how it does on flat, calm water. Okay, now let's see how it handles a rough chop. If flying float planes all day is not enough fun, then consider the diverse and festive family activities that are so much a part of Lake Havasu, Arizona. We consider it a great piece of luck that Dixieland Jazz Festival fell on the same weekend as the second annual Fun Float Fly, with great live Dixieland music coming out of half a dozen establishments around town any time of day or night. Lake Havasu is also home to the London Bridge. This 930-foot bridge, constructed of 33,000 tons of granite, was purchased by Robert McCulloch in London, England, for $2,460,000. After being dismantled and shipped to Arizona, it took 40 workers 1.5 years to reconstruct. Shipping and reconstruction cost, a mere $7,500,000. Back at the Nautical Inn, float planes continued to arrive throughout Saturday. Let's take a look at these beauties lined up on the beach. Robert Siegelkopf displayed his beautiful Vickers-Armstrong Walrus II. The Walrus is not quite finished and did not fly. Robert has used Bob Holman plans and scaled his plane to match the Sato 5-cylinder radial engine. This amphibian is an example of scale model building at its finest. That's Kenny Rutherstrand getting his new Super Cub ready to fly. These standoff scale mono coupes are more than just great-looking float planes. They are the end result of Mike Genovese's 7-year effort to build the ultimate 3-channel aircraft. With only rudder, elevator, and throttle, these 60-inch wingspan mono coupes really fly great. Mike says they started out as a SIG Cadet, which he kept changing and modifying until he had the most aerobatic 3-channel possible. Mike also told us that without the pendulum effects of floats, the planes will fly even more radically. The monocoupes also retain great stability and will fly indefinitely hands-off. When Charles Fuller carries an airplane onto a flight line, people generally stop to watch Chuck do his stuff. Charles is not only a top-notch builder, but a superb pilot. Today, he is flying his Bucher Youngman, built from a pilot kit. He powered this biplane with a Quadra 50. Watch how Chuck works through the rough chop close to shore by crossing the waves diagonally and looking for a relatively smooth area to get airborne.
Salinas, California. Give him a big hand for a beautiful show.
A slow-flying Astro Hog is always a pleasure to see, and on floats, it looks even better. The Pink Hog was built by Kurt Young of La Crescenta, California. This SIG airplane is humming along on an Enya 80 4-stroke. Kurt has added flaps for a little extra lift on takeoff. This wraps up our report on the second annual Lake Havasu Fun Float Fly. If you're interested in participating in a Snyder Cup event to take place on Lake Havasu in the fall of 1989, contact Bob Martin at 602-855-6900. The Snyder Cup race is sponsored by Scale RC Modeler and Bob Martin Models, hosted by the Desert Hawks RC Club. Next, we go to Reston, Virginia to interrupt Bob Underwood from his busy schedule. Bob is technical director of the AMA and took some time to show us his airplane, the Thingamabob. And we asked Bob a difficult question. Just what is it?
No, it's a Thingamabob. It's a tail dragger, trike gear, radio control, control line, glow-powered or electric-powered or tethered RC airplane.
That's a mouthful.
All of the above.
Is that where did the name Thingamabob come from?
A friend of mine thought it up. He said that it's a lot of many things. So let's just call it a thingamabob. And unfortunately, later on, I realized that it says thing, AMA Bob, and I didn't really plan it that way.
Okay, what's it made out of?
Well, it's just a basic balsa construction. Very, very simple. I kept it stock balsa sizes. The sides of the fuselage are 36 by 3 by 1/8 inch with just a little angle cut off. The whole construction, not counting the covering and designing, if you can call it designed, took about 6 hours. The idea basically was to try and come up with something that could be used by a beginner, a newcomer to the hobby, or even a group of youngsters, for instance, something like our Adopt-a-School program that could be flown in a very small, limited area without a great deal of sound problems. Flown as an electric, of course, there's no problem flying it on a school playground or whatever. And we thought if we had a group of youngsters with just a limited amount of money, they'd be able to come up with an airplane that would fly. And it can be converted from any of those options I gave you earlier in just a few minutes. Move the gear forward and it becomes tail dragger. Put a line on it and it's tethered. I put 2 lines on it and it's control line. The only thing you have to watch is that if you put the 2 lines on it and fly a control line without a throttle, don't fill the tank, because it'll fly about 20 minutes on a tank, and I stood out there and did that one day.
Tell us about the arrangement for tethered here, the post that you're tied to.
Okay, the post that we're using here was designed and built by Frank Anderson of MAC, the Canadian model airplane group. And Frank was using the idea to try and interest young people who have 2-channel car radios to get into airplanes. And it only uses 2 channels, just elevator and throttle. And they can get the idea of manipulating the sticks as they're flying in the circle, as we've done many times. He's worked with 6- and 7-year-olds, and they've been able to master it very quickly.
Bob, you're going to have to show us what's inside this airplane that makes it do all these different things.
All right, we'll do that. It's not very complicated, really. Four rubber bands, 6 rubber bands, huh? There's a very simple line guide at the wingtip, just 3 little loops. The center loop is used for the tethered condition. If you were flying a control line, you'd use the outside too, of course. There is a bell crank located on the center line, and you can see the tether attachment out here. It's just a single, I'm using 18,000 stranded line, and we've pull tested it, no problem with that. When you're ready to fly it in a control line or a tethered condition, you pull the push rod off of the rudder arm, the rudder servo arm, and place it on this little post right here. So that induces a little right turn and keeps it out there on the circle, so you don't have to worry about that. If you're going to fly a control line, rather than try to drag the servo with it, you simply pull the servo arm off, it just pulls off the hook, and then you can fly it in a regular control line configuration. If you want to, when you're ready to change the engine on the front, there are 4 632 bolts on the front. You pull those bolts off, the whole front end slides out. There's a tray with the tank and the throttle servo. Unplug the throttle servo, pull it off, put the electric motor in its place. If you want to make a tail dragger, the gear comes off with the firewall. You can just move the main gear forward a little bit. There are another set of blind nuts, and you've got a tail dragger. So you've got any of the configurations you want to use in just, 4 or 5 minutes time at the very most.
Bob assured me that even I could fly the Thingamabob tethered to the pole in the middle of the AMA parking lot. Bob started the engine and handed me the transmitter. Flying the thingamabob was easy. I can't remember being so relaxed with a transmitter in my hands. Flying touch-and-goes were fun, concentrating on throttle and elevator and leaving the tether to take care of everything else. If only I'd had one of these when I was getting started. If you enjoy getting people started flying RC, consider the benefit of a student flyer having a thorough understanding of elevator and throttle, as well as their relationship. It can really take the pressure off those first RC flights. If you're interested in more information on the thingamabob, drop a line to Bob Underwood at the Academy of Model Aeronautics, 1810 Samuel Morris Drive, Reston, Virginia, 22090.
At RC Video, we've received countless requests to put together a collection of spectacular crashes that we've captured on tape over the years. Well, hold on to your ailerons. Here comes RC Crash Course.
This is a Tom Cook Starfire, or what used to be.
I see. Well, it looks like you can save some of it. What's left?
Well, I still got a pretty good fuselage. About all I need to really do is just buy a new set of wings and just basically check everything out. And I'll have her flying, I say, in about a good 4 months' time.
Okay, you going to be back next year?
Oh, yes, sir. I'm going to have not only this one, but I'll probably have 2 others. This didn't frustrate me at all. I'm going to stay with the ducted fans. I really am.
What happened?
Not enough spruce.
It looks like it got broke.
Yeah, the elevator broke on it. Augered in. That's all right, we'll build another one.
Okay, you don't think this one's fixable?
You got some hot stuff? We'll try to get
Well, I'm
it
sure
there.
sorry to see that.
No problem. We enjoy it.
You take it real well.
Oh, yeah. I'll cry later. Bye, guys.
We're talking with Brian O'Mara, who had the Pistol Packin' Mama, which was a, what kind of aircraft was it, Brian?
It was a P-47D Thunderbolt from a Scalcraft kit, weighed approximately 24 pounds. Had approximately 60 flights on it before it hit the cactus. I was on a traffic pattern for a landing, for my landing, and when the engine quit. On an outbound, on my outbound turn.
How does it feel to lose a plane that you've worked on so long?
You build them to fly them, and when you fly them, you're going to break them.
Have you been breaking lots of rotor blades lately? Would you like to have a smooth flying helicopter like this one? Well, let's see what information Ed Nakasone has to share with us in this article about helicopter rotor blades.
Hi, this is Ed, Breaker Blade Nakasone again. How y'all doing out there? Glad to see you guys are, in fact, taking me literally and breaking a blade. As I indicated earlier, to achieve a smooth flying helicopter, one of the major requirements is to get a perfectly balanced blade. And that's what we're going to be covering today, blade covering and blade balancing. Before we begin, however, let me explain to you some of these blades that's on the market today. Here's a typical blade. This is a Schluter blade here, how it's constructed right out of the box here. What you'll find is a layer of hardwood material in the first half of the leading edge and several layers of balsa material for the trailing edge. In addition to that, you'll have some hardwood material for your blade root, as well as a brass piece of material so you can hold your blades with your boat here. Inspect the blades for any cracks along the way or any warps that you might have, as in this case here. If you do have a warp, obviously, take it back to the place you bought it from. Inspect the blades, like I said, for any chip. Here's an actual blade that was taken out of the box and cracked in this point here. Another one that is not common but may happen to you as it did to me is the length of the blade here. Make sure that they are in fact the same length. If not, again, return it back to your place of purchase there. As in my case, I've flown helicopters several years now, and I did have an accident whereby the blades actually flew off in flight. Now, to prevent that, Miniature Aircraft Incorporated has developed a new blade root that will prevent that. In this case, Mr. Sconard, the president of Miniature Aircraft, indicated that this particular blade will withstand up to 4,000 pounds pull here. That's tremendous. These blades come already slotted with weights so that you can in fact have a CG corrected blade for any auto rotation process there. In addition to that, several fiberglass blades are on the market, as in this case here. This is a blade for the Heim helicopter here. It's a washout material with tapered. The washout tapered process there just provides an equal amount of force along the blades here. The only problem with this is it gets quite expensive. Materials on the market today for blade covering are somewhat similar to this, like this adhesive foil, which was developed by Mr. Dieter Schluter some years ago. Another one is this easy-to-use heat shrink material. The material we'll be using today is your basic white plastic adhesive that we will be referring to as the foil. Okay, as far as the tools are concerned, as you know, there's numerous tools and products on the market today to aid you in the proper balancing of the blades. These tools in front of me are just a bare necessity that I use and have been proven over and over again to aid me as far as achieving a perfect balance. Obviously, you need a sandpaper, about a 320 grit sandpaper to sand the blades down, a pencil for marking, and above all, a good sharp X-Acto blade, knife rather, several tools to lock down your blade on your blade holder, a measuring device. I use this 90-degree vise to mount my razor blade here to balance and find out where my center of gravity is on my blades. I use a clamping device to hold down my high pointer onto the table here. Now the high pointer, I think, is a necessary item in achieving precise balancing of the blade here. I've modified mine whereby I could use a Heim main shaft, a 10mm main shaft, whereby I can just go ahead and put it in there. You noted that I've also have my Schluter follower, which will be mounted on the head, but this is the device I use totally to balance the head in its entirety. But to balance the blade, I got to insist that this is a clever device developed by Mr. Dieter Schluter, and it's sold to Roby Model Products, a blade balancer. It balances each blade relative to each other Now, as far as this yardstick is concerned, a metal yardstick, I use this to line up my rotor blades onto the head before I lock it up and balance it. This quarter I use to provide weight for my covering material during the covering process here. And finally, these blades will be going into the pre-balancing portion prior to covering the blades itself. I have a step that I include in here which is called pre-balancing and determining where the center of gravity of each blade is. I have no scale, therefore I'm utilizing the Shaluta blade balancer to accomplish this for me. Go ahead and slip the blades in here and determine which is the heavier blade. The purpose of this is to determine the heavier blade is to ensure that if there's any adjustments that we can have the light blade adjusted up to the heavier blade. Now we're pretty much in sync here, so take this off, place the other blade, and we're just, like I said, just relatively predetermining which is the heavier so we can make any adjustments if necessary. Here in this case we've determined that this is a lighter blade, so if there's any weights or any adjustments to be made, we'll bring the lighter blade up to the heavier blade, so I better mark that at this time with an H here to indicate which is the heavier one. Once I've determined which is the heavier blade, I'll go ahead and from the underside determine which is where the center of gravity of each blade is located at. Once it's balanced, I'll just go ahead with my palm, lightly press on it to get a line and mark it with my pencil at this point here. Same thing with the other blade. With my palm again, lightly pressing down on the blade, creating that line there, and I'll go ahead and mark it with my pencil. I'll go ahead and align my blades together to see how far apart my center of gravity is from each other. In this case, they're awfully close, off less than a millimeter. So the tolerance here is about 1 to 2 millimeter apart. Then everything should be in sync. And I also noted that the blades aren't too far apart from each other as far as their total weight is concerned. So at this point, there's no real major adjustments that is necessary on this particular blade set here. If it were off, that's when you have to either drill different holes to bring the CG into balance or the blade in balance together, or add in additional weights and or taking off weights. So that's the process we're looking for in the pre-balancing. Now everything is good, so we'll go ahead and cover the blades itself. Here's a diagram that I've drawn up here. The green depicts the rotor blades itself. What we're going to do, the black is the covering material. We're going to have a little lip here of about 1/4 of an inch on the trailing edge. Then come on up and just wrap the foil around the blades in this direction to the underside and finish up here. Okay, so we're ready to cover here. Let's get the foil out and take off the backing of the adhesive itself. Here again, I recommend that you lay this material on a flat surface and pull in the back because it has a tendency to wrinkle on you, and that wrinkle is very difficult to remove once placed in there. And discard the paper. Now, at this point I indicated I place about 1/4 of an inch to the underside of the blade, so I'll go ahead and mark it at this time here. So to cover the underside first, this is what we're going to do. We line the blades on top of these marks that the 1/4 inch marks that I just drawn on here with the blade edge to the far extreme of the foil itself. Then by gradually pressing down on the adhesive material, placing my 1/4 onto the adhesive material and sliding the foil out completely. At this point, what I'm doing is from the center, working out plastic foil onto the trailing edge. Like I indicated, this is a balsa trailing edge, so be very careful as you work on this. Note how the 1/4 is just hanging down there, preventing the material from folding over and sticking onto the blade. Another thing is that this hand is there to prevent the foil from wrapping around onto the blade. So work it on and be very neat and precise. I'll hold the blades in this manner here, and with my thumb working from the center, I'll go ahead and work all the bubbles and wrinkles out of the materials itself there. I'm sure you can see what I'm doing right here. And just gradually working it towards the leading edge. Working it out, ensuring that there's no bubble, no wrinkle. You don't have to rub it that hard. And that's basically what you have as far as the blade covering. Now that we got our blade covered, I've affixed this blade tracking material to each of these blades here. This is a critical moment now. We know that the blades are pretty much in balance to each other, but we need to make another final check to ensure that they remain there due to the covering material that we utilized here. So again, you recall that we marked this heavy blade with an H here. We'll go ahead and get that thing balanced in first. Okay, it's good for close measures, just to determine if we still have a light blade and a heavy blade. So let's check this out here. And yep, we still have a light blade here. So now let's go back and double check with the center of gravity, or the CG of each blade, see if it remained the same. And we mark with our palm again. We'll do that there. We got a nice mark here. Same thing again. And a very quick check will indicate that, oh God, we're closer on the CG right now, so that's perfect. With that, we know that this is the heavier blade. We need to bring the lighter blade up to meet the heavy blade. Here again, it's just a trial and error process. Cut a strip of material. There's that sticky part of the adhesive part. Turn it upwards, don't stick it to your blade at this time. And remember where you had your mark of the CG, place that right over the center of gravity. We're pretty close here, awfully close. I call that great. The object here again is to ensure that we bring both blades into balance, and that'll be the key to the entire process. And here we go, wrapping it around and bringing it over and double checking it. That's great. See no problem here, super. We'll go back and double check the heavy blade. Well, it's not a heavy blade anymore because we've really pretty much balanced these two blades to each other. And with that, the true test again is mount the blade onto the hold system utilizing the high pointer. Now the final stage, as I indicated, was to mount everything on the head assembly and check it on the high pointer. Now this particular assembly was checked thoroughly, but before I begin, and I need to explain to you that this particular head assembly belongs to the Saluda Champion. As such, you'll note that the collective mechanism and the follower is offset on one side, thereby giving you a different ratio as far as the balancing of the head is concerned. To counteract that, I've added a aluminum wheel weight from your car on this side to keep the ballast equal on this head assembly itself. Note also that I've included every linkage that I can and just tied it down here on this 10mm shaft. Then of course I balance the head assembly without the blades onto the high pointer to ensure that everything is in fact in balance. Then I've added the main rotor blades onto the head assembly simply by ensuring that everything is aligned or parallel to the blade holder. Do the same with the other blade as well. From there, go ahead and mount your assembly in the high pointer, and if everything worked out in according to plan, you see that everything will pretty much hold in its way. Horizontally, check it out. Vertically, you should hold pretty good there. Do it on all 4 points here, and you'll find that everything is pretty much in balance here. And the ultimate test is to hold it at about a 45-degree angle. And if she's balanced perfectly, this is what you'll find here. Voila. 37, 38, 39, 40. Well, I guess this wraps up this portion of blade covering and blade balancing. So again, this is Ed Break-A-Blade Nakasone for RC Video Magazine saying, happy flying, and don't forget, break a blade. 41, 42, oh hell.
During this past season, RC Video Magazine has spent 3 months filming its new video release, RC Wheels. It's an entertaining 30-minute program that covers 1/10 scale, 1/8 scale, and the incredible quarter-scale model cars. Throughout the production of this video, we came upon the realization that quarter-scale cars bear some similarity in the complex technology and building of model aircraft. At this time, we think it would be interesting to share some of the information we have learned about these monster models and one of the companies that manufactures these amazing machines. Located approximately 100 miles south of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, in the heart of beautiful, rolling southern farmland, is Buffalo, Texas, home of the Pandemonium Speedway and WCM Manufacturing. Owned and operated by the Cheek family, WCM has ventured into the high-tech world of quarter-scale radio-controlled cars after spending several years in full-scale racing. While filming at the Pandemonium Raceway, we saw 3 categories of cars speeding around the track: the sprint car, super modified, and everybody's favorite, the Grand National stock car. Owning and building any of these quarter-scale cars definitely puts you into the adults-only area of radio-controlled cars. The kits start in the highest end of the model car hobby, and as the old saying goes, you get what you pay for. These quarter-scale cars come in kit form with all the components needed to completely build the model, and many of the kits have optional accessories included. The chain-driven cars are powered with a high RPM 2-stroke engine that, when muffled, reproduces realistic engine sounds. The tough bodies on these cars give modelers the opportunity to give them full-scale appearances. As far as performance goes, these cars are designed with the intent to give the driver realistic handling capabilities of the full-size racers. Even though the sprint cars weigh in the 20 to 30-pound range, the chassis can be set up to handle the demands of any track or race situation. Radio control technology is shared by the model airplane industry and the model car industry. Most of the quarter-scale cars we saw are equipped with a standard 2-channel radio system, with the pistol grip controller being the most popular form of control. The main difference between an RC car and an RC aircraft is with an airplane you can fly with a group of friends or simply go out and have an afternoon or weekend of flying by yourself. With the quarter-scale cars, though, once you've gotten a few laps under your belt, there is this incredible urge to get out there and test your skills against other drivers. Competition is the most popular form of action in quarter-scale. You'll find many of the people that race quarter-scale today raced full-size cars at one point in time. The variety of cars available and the improvements to the cars seems almost endless, with new ideas and new technologies providing more realistic performance. WCM holds special clinics every few months to pass along new information to its car owners. WCM is very proud of its sales and service system. Once you buy a WCM car, you become part of an information-sharing network that helps each owner with maintenance and service tips for the maximum enjoyment of the hobby. These folks are learning about chassis setup and how to keep their cars running fast. The quarter-scale car hobby is growing very quickly in popularity, with organized racing events taking place all over the country. The races often carry purses of several $1,000s. The weekend we spent at WCM, there were many drivers in attendance who belonged to the Southern Regional WCM Challenge Series race circuit, racing on quarter-scale tracks within a 4-state area. Luckily, we were able to shoot a few races in order to give you an overview of this exciting RC hobby. We hope you enjoyed our brief look at quarter-scale cars. If you would like more information about the quarter-scale cars you have seen here, you can contact WCM at Route 2, Box 207A, Buffalo, Texas, 75831, or call them at 214-322-4869. If you would like to see an exciting and entertaining videotape that covers quarter scale, 1/10 scale, and 1/8 scale radio-controlled cars, contact RC Video Magazine in Colorado and ask us about the RC Wheels program that we have to offer.
Can't drink, can't drive. I'm sick of thinking how to have a good time. Can't smoke, big joke. Trouble is there are rules to be broke.
Most modelers would love to fly an authentic scale model, but lack the time to build such an airplane. Well, Sports Aviation Company has come up with a line of almost ready-to-fly models, which include World War II scale fighters. Now we're going to review two of those models. The first is the P-51D Mustang, and the second is its German rival, the Focke-Wulf FW-190. I'm Dave Howe, and with me is Ken Wells. And Ken, you're overdressed as usual.
Well, Dave, I'm always ready to get out there and clear the skies of rabble.
Well, we'll see about that.
All right.
When you look inside the box and the kit is unassembled, the first thing you notice is that there's very good workmanship throughout this kit. The thing that I noticed immediately were four things. One is that the pre-cut and die-cut hardwood within the kit is all done to perfection. It's very, very well done, very good balsa throughout, and very good hardwood in places where you do see the balsa. After all, this is almost ready to fly, and it's covered and ready to assemble. In addition to that, split elevators, a wishbone push rod, something that I think all kits should have, so that it gives you that little extra trimability which you might not otherwise have. Ailerons are already attached to the wings. Also, the engine in the Focke-Wulf FW-190 is not inverted, but since there's room in the cowl, they mount it at 45 degrees off axis. This means that you don't have the problem of glow plug clogging when you're trying to start the engine in the upright position. Another factor, too, is the designers considered the lateral balance of the aircraft. Normally the muffler sits in one direction and the cylinder head in the other direction. Balance on this airplane is very, very good from the start, and I appreciated those little design touches. And last, the decals allow you the option to put the swastika on the aircraft or not to, for those of you concerned about that.
Well, the P-51 is very similar. The differences are in color scheme and some of the scale detail, but power requirements are exactly the same for the two aircraft. I enjoy this aircraft immensely. The steps that you do have to do are very satisfying. A little bit of work and the aircraft moves along very quickly. I did run into something I'd like to compare with Dave and see how his procedure went. In the instructions, you're supposed to glue in a wing saddle block, this piece right here. It slides in the fuselage cavity at the rear. Now, when the wings are joined together, you line them up with the fuselage, set them down, and you need to drill 2 holes to line up with the blind nuts. I had a little trouble. I had to pause and think about how was I going to get those holes lined up. I tried sticking pencil points into the holes, pressing the wing down in place and getting marks. It was less than perfect. I was wondering how you might have approached that.
Well, I approached it a little bit differently. When the wing halves were joined in my case, I found that a technique that would work is to go ahead and put the wing screws in from inside the fuselage so that the points protrude upward. Then when the wing is mounted, there's a score that's put on the wing, and those scores then give you the pilot for the holes that you need to drill for the wing mounts themselves, the wing holes. I didn't find so much of a problem with that, but I ran into a little bit of difficulty with the cowling. The cowling design used on the German aircraft was one of the engineering feats which really made the Focke-Wulf excel. In the case of the scaling of the kit, the cowling itself, my muffler was running into the surface of the cowl, and that caused a problem. So I ended up putting a muffler extension on the engine and then moving the muffler outside, and that eliminated that problem.
I was wondering, Dave, what you felt was the skill level that this kit is aimed at.
Well, I wouldn't recommend it for a novice. The instructions are very thorough, but really you should be an intermediate flyer to take on a plane of this speed.
Obviously, a fighter aircraft is going to be something that is more aerobatic and a little faster, and probably is, I agree, a more advanced aircraft.
Well, let's take a look at the aircraft.
Dave, how long did it take you to construct
Well,
your
it took me about 12 hours to do it. It took me about, that turned out to be about 2 weeks. Actually, in 3 days, you have an aircraft that looks pretty much complete, and that's a nice feeling. It motivates you to continue on.
You know, Dave, these kits call for a 40 to a 45 size engine. I've chosen the Enya 63. It always seems like with a Warbird you can get away with a little more power and justify it. I was just wondering what engine you've used.
Ken, I chose the HB 61 with PDP. and I think that'll keep up with your P-51D just nicely. The thing that I did want to point out, though, was this cowling arrangement and how the muffler protrudes on an extension away from the motor, and that made for a clean layout on the cowl.
You know, the P-51 rolled off the assembly line in February of 1943. It came into the war kind of late, relatively late. It had some advantages in that it had an 800-mile radius flying capability, and it had a slight superiority in the speed. It also was very deadly because it had a computing gun sight and mechanical trim tabs, which made the plane deadly accurate. The plane was very popular with pilots, but it was referred to as the spam can.
I wasn't aware of that history, Ken, but one thing that I know about the Focke-Wulf is that its introduction in 1941 represented the best that Germany had to offer technically. However, the Germans were out of ace pilots at that time. That was actually on the downside of the war effort for the Germans. They were beginning to retreat, and the Focke-Wulf has never really shown its true capabilities.
Well, this may not change history in any way, but I like to challenge Dave to a little duel at the airfield.
You're on. Choose your weapon.
I'd take the P-51, of course. Dave and I prepared our planes for the first test flight. I think we both felt confident that our chosen aircraft were superior, and took opportunities to inform the other of that fact. Wanting no further verbal abuse, Dave taxied into position and prepared the Focke-Wulf for takeoff.
The weight of the plane being relatively high for the wingspan of about 54 inches, I was preparing myself for a first flight that was tough. Not only that, it was a breezy day. Amazingly, the Focke-Wulf trimmed out beautifully. Overall, I rate the Focke-Wulf 190 as a performance machine that builds quickly and is easy to feel comfortable with for the intermediate flyer.
My first impression of the P-51 is it goes fast, but handling is solid and responsive. I don't advise any more throw in the control surfaces than recommended. Even when set up per instructions, you may find yourself reaching for the dual rate switch. This airplane is not hard to fly, but it is hot, and you'll want to have some experience with fast, low-wing aircraft. If you're looking for performance in a plane that looks great and takes a small amount of time to build, give the P-51 or any of the easy line of scale aircraft a try. After getting comfortable flying the planes, Dave and I refueled and were ready to engage in a little aerial combat. It doesn't take much imagination to feel you're behind the controls of a fighter aircraft when you're flying the easy P-51 or Focke-Wulf from Hobby Shack.